Gene. Sorry. We just missed the signal. Oh, we did. All right.
You vanished. You got it?
I had to get my fitness stuff out of the way. And see that this had been moved too. Well, let's try this again. Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal, religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. We're glad to have you with us this morning. This is a very welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique beliefs, backgrounds, lifestyles. And if you're one of our long-term members or have been here a short time, or if you're joining us today for the very first time, we're so glad you're with us. We're also glad that those who are streaming with us today have joined us, and those that are joining us by Zoom, would you like to introduce yourself today? Then Zoom disappeared. Okay. Maybe we will get them back in a little bit. So I want to thank Jean Larson today for filling in for Debbie, who's on vacation. So thank you very much, Jean. And also, it is my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker this morning, sooner or later, via Zoom, Stephen Polmar. He's a UUCS and an NAUA member. And I'll introduce him in more detail a little bit later on in the service. So now, if you, before we get started, why don't you just take a few minutes to greet each other and say hello. Thank you. We'll have more time to greet one another and share our stories and have good conversation during social hour after the service. So we now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting the chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community and individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. My opening reflection this morning is from Dean Koontz. All human lives are so profoundly and intricately entwined, those dead, those living, those generations yet to come, that the fate of all is the fate of each, and the hope of humanity rests in every heart and in every pair of hands.
You will notice that our seasonal banner has been changed to the summer banner, and we celebrated solstice last Wednesday. At least I celebrated. I always love the summer solstice. And we will sing Chant for the Seasons, the summer verse.
Summer
We will now kindle our candles of care. Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our minds and our hearts, and who we want to wrap in our love and our care. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts and minds this morning. And you're welcome to say their names out loud if you are willing. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world at this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world.
Good morning. I've brought Bun Bun with me, and I failed to put him under the podium, but we're all of an age where we know what's actually happening here, so I think it's all right. All right, hello, Bun Bun. It's great to see you again. I suppose you're all done with school now. How do you feel about that? Oh, he says he's going to miss his school friends and his teachers, but he's excited to play with his park friends. And who exactly are your park friends, Bun Bun? Oh, you met them last summer at the park in your neighborhood. Do I remember correctly that you invented a game together? Falafel or something? Oh, Farfaloofa. Some of you might remember that. Last summer he told us about a game he invented, and he made it up all on his own without any adults telling him what to do. That is such a fun way to play, and it's a fun way to learn. Do you plan to play that again? Oh, well, why not? Oh, he says he's too old to play baby games, and he sounded pretty sad. Does getting older make you feel sad, Bun Bun? Oh, I get that. No matter what, each summer we're 1 year older than we were last summer, and that means that we might like different things. We might have new skills and interests. We might have new friends. We might have new feelings. Sometimes growing up is a lot of fun, but sometimes it also creates sad feelings or just confusion about what to do. I see two options. Would you like to hear them, Bun Bun? Okay. One, you could create a new version of your game that's more challenging for bunnies your age. Or two, you could teach the younger kids at the playground how to play your game. I suspect that they look up to you and your playground friends, and that they'd feel pretty special if you taught them your game. I also suspect that you would get some big bunny skills in teaching them. Does that sound good? All right, Bun Bun. We'll have fun at the playground playing Farfaloofa and teaching the little bunnies how to play it with you. We will see you soon.
As we move into a time of meditation, Find a comfortable position. Close your eyes if you wish. Take a deep breath in. Breathe out. And through it all, we attempt to bring balance to the present moment, understanding that in patience lies wisdom, knowing that what will come next will be determined in large measure by how we are now. This is helpful to keep in mind when we get impatient in our meditation, or when we get frustrated, impatient, and angry in our lives. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching asks this of us: do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? Our reading today has been provided by Stephen Polmar, who is going to be sharing the sermon with us in just a little bit. The reading is from The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity, a sermon by Theodore Parker on May 19th, 1841. Such, then, is the transient, and such the permanent in Christianity. What is of absolute value never changes. We may cling round it and grow to it forever. No one can say his notions shall stand, but we may say the truth shall never pass away. Yet there are always some even religious men who do not see the permanent element, and so rely on the fleeting. And what is also an evil, condemn others for not doing the same. Now, as always, there is a collision between these two elements. The question puts itself to each man: will you cling to what is perishing or embrace what is eternal? The question each must answer for himself. Thank you, Maura. So it's going to be my pleasure now to introduce Stephen Polmar. Stephen is a UUCS and a member of the North American Unitarian Association. He serves on the Provisional NAUA Board of Trustees as well as the Advisory Board of the NAUA Academy, and is one of the hosts of the UUCS Sunday Services Zoom group. He is also a volunteer coordinator for an interfaith group of 6 churches that provides housing for refugees in support of the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants. Stephen received his undergraduate degree from Union College of Schenectady, New York, and a PhD and an MD degree from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Retired now, he is an immunologist and a pediatrician and held professorships at Case Western Reserve and Washington University in St. Louis. Following his career in academic medicine, he was a vice president in drug development at an international pharmaceutical company, Boehringer Ingelheim. Stephen became a Unitarian at age 17, and while in college, he seriously considered a career in the ministry. However, his religion professor convinced him that he might be more suited to a career in the sciences and/or medicine. Nonetheless, he has maintained a strong interest in religion, theology, and Unitarianism in particular, and this is his first sermon. He lives in Woodbridge, Connecticut, and Perugia, Italy, with his wife, Suzanne, and he will make his presentation via Zoom from Italy. So, welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Gordon. And I would especially like to thank Reverend Eckloff for inviting me to make a presentation of this sermon from his pulpit. It is a great honor. On May 19th, 1841, the Reverend Theodore Parker delivered the sermon for the ordination of Reverend Charles Shackford at the Hawes Place Church in Boston. The title of his sermon was The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity. During that period in the mid-19th century, there was a great deal of controversy regarding a variety of theological issues, both within the new denomination of Unitarianism, as well as between other Christian denominations. These debates dealt with the origin and authority of the Bible, the nature and authority of Jesus, that revelation of God's will through Jesus Christ was absolutely required for the salvation of sinners, and so on. However, Parker sought to identify the core, the bedrock of Christianity as a religion. That is what he termed the permanent, and to distinguish it from the theological noise of the time that he termed the transient. He believed that, quote, the great truths of morality and religion, the depth of a sentiment of love to man and love to God, are perceived intuitively and by instinct. He opined that this religion existed in the fact of human nature and in the idea of an infinite God. Moreover, he clearly stated that these truths of morality and religion, for which Christianity are based on the teachings of Jesus, did not, quote, rest for their support on the personal authority of their revealer, any more than the truths of science on that of him who made them first known or most clearly, close quote. Parker goes on to say that, quote, it is hard to see why the truths of Christianity rest on the personal authority of Jesus, more than the axioms of geometry rest on the personal authorities of Euclid or Archimedes. So, is Parker's concept of the transient and the permanent in a religion relevant to Unitarian Universalism almost 2 centuries later? The challenge that successive generations of Unitarians and subsequently Unitarian Universalists have raised during the subsequent 182 years has been to articulate the religious truths their origin inside. A way that does not depend solely upon a single body of religious literature, namely the Old Testament and the New Testament, whose authority, authenticity, accuracy, and credibility were clearly questionable, or upon the pronouncements of a central church hierarchical authority. Another challenge, perhaps unique to Unitarianism and Unitarian Universalism, is the evolutionary nature of the religion itself, namely the conviction that all moral and religious revelations have not occurred only in the distant past, but that additional insights have occurred since that time and are still occurring even up to the present day, and not from only one source, but from multiple sources. In this regard, Unitarianism and Unitarian Universalism are more like a science than a religion. That is, we believe that we will get closer to the truth by asking questions and seeking answers from multiple sources, rather than being certain that we already know all that which is true and that no further inquiry is necessary. As Unitarianism and subsequently Unitarian Universalism evolved during the last 198 years, beginning again in the mid-19th century, it began to cast a broader net in search for moral and religious truth. The first of these new sources were the Hindu scriptures, the Puranas, the Vedas, the Gita, and Upanishads, introduced to Unitarian theology by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Subsequently, the writings of other world religions were explored as well. Early in the 20th century, Unitarianism in particular was strongly influenced by humanistic thinking, with many of the signatories of the first Humanist Manifesto in 1933 being Unitarian ministers and theologians. And more recently, earth-based religion, and specifically Native American influences, have become incorporated. As Unitarianism and Universalism grew closer together in the first part of the 20th century, each denomination tried to articulate in a document of principles those moral and religious concepts that were fundamental to their faith. In the 1953 Universalist Universalist Declaration of Faith, the Universalists clearly expressed Universalism's Christian roots with statements concerning, quote, God as eternal and all-conquering love and the leadership of Jesus, as well as statements affirming, quote, the power of men of goodwill and sacrificial spirit to overcome all evil and progressively establish the kingdom of God. In addition, in the 1953 Universalist Declaration, there's a statement specifically stating, quote, the supreme worth of every the supreme worth of every human personality, close quote. While sounding humanistic, it was entirely consistent with long-standing universalist theology and is reflected in the first principle of the current version of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. The statement of purposes and objectives of the American Unitarian Association, revised in 1959, was more general than that of the Universalists. It did mention the teachings of Jesus as love to God and love to man, as did Parker in 1851. However, its other statements were less specific, appearing to be a compromise between traditional Christian influences and the strong emerging humanistic thinking within the denomination at that time. After the merger of the Unitarians and Universalists in 1961, the new Unitarian Universalist Association attempted to summarize the central theological and governing concepts of the newly unified faith in a document of principles and purposes, which was subsequently revised and updated in 1985. Many of the concepts in earlier such attempts are reflected in the 7 principles of 1985, with reference to the origin of some of these ideas now listed in a separate document, the 6 sources. All these efforts attempt to define the moral and religious core of Unitarian Universalism more clearly. These are what Parker would have termed the permanent. The modifications that have been introduced over the years were made to clarify those core values, and in some cases to incorporate, quote, new revelations. For example, as reflected in the 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. While social justice has, since Parker's day, been a major influence of Unitarianism, Universalism, and Unitarian Universalism, individual causes have never specifically been cited as core elements of the religion. Parker himself was an ardent abolitionist and supported women's rights, as well as penal reform and a variety of other social issues. Parker never considered these causes as part of the core of his religion. These were social and political issues to be dealt with and resolved. In essence, they were issues he would have considered transient. For Parker, it was the permanent in Christianity, the commitment of, quote, love to man and love to God, which enjoined one to act with, quote, humility, reverence, sobriety, gentleness, charity, forgiveness, fortitude, resignation, faith, and active love. This was the source of energy to address the social issues of his day, and in fact, to make them transient. For Parker, if Parker had instead said that the core mission of Unitarianism was the abolition of slavery, at the conclusion of the Civil War, when the slaves were freed, the raison d'etre for Unitarianism would have no longer existed. Likewise, had a similar focus been placed on women's suffrage by a later generation of Unitarians, many of whom were leaders of the women's suffrage movement, when the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution became law in 1920, giving women the right to vote, Unitarianism would have found itself in an existential crisis. From time to time, I believe that it is appropriate to re-examine the basic tenets of a religion. This is certainly true for Unitarian Universalism, which believes that revelation is an ongoing process, and new information from the sciences and other sources should be considered as well. We are not bound by an ossified creed written in 325 AD. Indeed, such a re-examination is going on right now by the Article 2 Study Commission and at the UUA General Assembly. Article 2 of the bylaws of the UUA contain the clearest statement of the basic tenets of Unitarian Universalism as articulated in its principles and sources. Some have proposed to do away with the current principles and sources entirely. In fact, I believe that is the way the GA voted just today or yesterday. Others would like to have one-word statements of values in their place, while still others would like to add statements of commitment to important current social justice issues with which our society is currently struggling, most notably that of racism. I believe that Theodore Parker was prescient in making the distinction between the transient and the permanent in religion, which, in my opinion, is relevant to the issues we face today. What are the core beliefs and values of contemporary Unitarian Universalism that will permit us to address the social justice challenges of today, while at the same time meeting the spiritual needs of our members? Can we express those concisely and unambiguously? The inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations. These seem to call one to address the issues of racism, gender inequality, homelessness, and other contemporary social justice issues. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and the right of conscience and the use of democratic processes within our congregations and in society at large. These highlight the way in which issues should be approached with rational thought and an open mind and resolved by democratic processes. While a valid argument could be made to reword or even reorder some of the principles, being able to somehow encapsulate these ideas into a single word with unambiguous meaning would seem to be difficult, if not impossible. The current principles are trying to give voice to the permanent in Unitarian Universalism, even as Parker would have said, quote, "They do so imperfectly and miserably." Should the principles be discarded entirely, as some have proposed, because of the identity of the people who wrote them, messengers? Parker would have argued that the truths that were permanent in Christianity and the truths that we attempt to express as the permanent in Unitarian Universalism are intuitive and are not dependent on the authority or nature of their authors or messengers. an attempt to bring greater accuracy and clarity to the principles, the permanent in Unitarian Universalism, may be a valid and worthwhile undertaking. Abandoning them entirely is not, in my opinion. Equally important is the need to recognize the transient, those ills currently in our society that need to be addressed, remediated, and if possible, eliminated, so that they are indeed only transient. These include, most prominently, racism, gender inequality, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, homelessness, income inequality and poverty, voter suppression, immigrant and refugee rights, gun violence, and the environment, to name just a few. As Unitarian Universalists, the energy and commitment to address and overcome current and future social justice challenges will be powered by the permanent in our faith, our principles. May it be so, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Very good.
Now we sing together, "The Morning Hangs a Signal." It's number 40 in your hymnal. Please stand as you're willing and able.
As we depart today, I want to share these closing words from Reverend Steve Crump. That which is worthy of doing, create with your hands. That which is worthy of repeating, Speak with a clear voice. That which is worthy of remembering, hold in your hearts. And that which is worthy of living, go and live it now. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum. Shalom.